I'm going to be joined today by Steve Baughman, who his name is attached to the recent rabbi scandal in evangelicalism today in American Christianity, basically. And so I thought, as Christians, we have a moral obligation to truth, to justice, no matter the cost. And in light of this scandal and many others, it seems clear that we are more prone toward preserving a brand or reputation. So I thought it would be actually edifying for Christians to hear from Steve Baughman and his take. So thank you, Steve, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Sure. And a little bit about yourself. I think you're a lawyer, you're a banjo player, you're a guitar player. Can you get into your background a bit?
Oh, yeah. I've been a musician my whole life. I started playing guitar at about age 10 and have not stopped. So it's been over a half century. I play a lot of banjo too. And I went to law school after grad school because I didn't know what to do. So I became a lawyer, and that's been 30 years now, and it's been great. And I'm cramming a lot into my life. And this Ravi thing just happened to become a big part of my life about 5 years ago. It was very, very unexpected, but it's been an extraordinarily rich learning experience, to put it mildly.
Sure, and we're going to get into that. And first off, your YouTube name is Friendly Banjo Atheist. And I really like that, because we need more civility when it comes to these dialogues. We need more decency. And many times evangelicals aren't decent, and sometimes atheists might react to that. And so I appreciate your tone and your civility from what I've seen. I had a few interactions with you, I think on Twitter and then through email, but I appreciate your graciousness. So thank you for that.
I hope I was nice to you. I'm not always. I get cranky. There's so much nastiness out there on all sides of the issues, and it's just discouraging. It's like, come on, folks. Do you want to have temper tantrums, or do you want to communicate? And I think people prefer the temper tantrums. They feel a lot better, and they're a lot easier to do than to actually open your mind and try seeing other people's views. So it's really depressing. But thank you for thinking I'm doing it nicely. I try.
Sure. And can you give a little bit about yourself in particular? Like, have you always been an atheist? Can you unpack that in your journey?
Yeah, I grew up in Southeast Asia around Southern Baptist missionaries. My folks were not in the church at all, but I remember in Sunday Sunday, and we sang that song, He lives, Christ Jesus lives today. He walks with me and talks with me along life's narrow way. You ask me how I know he lives. He lives within my heart. And I remember just a little kid thinking, that's one lame answer. How do I know he lives? He lives within my heart. I didn't know the concept of begging the question back then, but I thought that just seemed like a really stupid answer. And but I eventually signed up and was born again, had a bunch of different experiences of coming and going into the faith. And when I moved to the US at age 18 and I went full on for a couple of years, I decided now's the time to really get committed to Christ. And it lasted about 2 years. And at age 20, I decided I've got to be honest with myself and stop faking this. I simply cannot bring myself to really believe it. I go through epistemic or belief roller coasters, ups and downs, but I was never able to escape that still small voice that said, no one hears you when you pray. And so I finally started admitting that, and haven't really looked back. I'm still very interested. I'm still studying on a formal level as a part-time grad student with Christians at the Graduate Theological Union over in Berkeley. I'm very interested in trying to keep up with the best and brightest in Christian scholarship. But I do find it really hard to believe.
Thank you for that. And I lost you just for a few seconds. So you said you were in Asia as were you the child of missionary parents?
No, my father was with a pharmaceutical company and wasn't at all religious, and my mother took us to Sunday school because that's what she's German and that's what you do. So, or back then it is. So, and she wanted us to have a religious upbringing. So my sisters and I would go to Sunday school, and I really actually liked it. I loved the singing. I loved the scene. I liked the people a lot. So, but no, there wasn't much religion in our family.
Sure. So kind of nominal Christians.
Cultural Christians with with a real passion for Christmas and the
Yeah.
ceremony. So
Easter.
yeah, and Easter also. Yeah,
Yeah.
we celebrated both vigorously. So, and Christmas is still a big part of our lives.
Thank you for sharing. And I guess to move on to how your name got attached to this scandal and to Ravi Zacharias, how did it fall in your lap, or can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, it was 5.5 years ago, and as part of my studies, I remember summer or late spring, early summer of 2015, as part of my intellectual and quasi-spiritual development, I try to read who's who in Christian apologetics, and I found this incredibly impressive guy named Ravi Zacharias. Found him on YouTube, and I was really blown away by a particular argument he made. And I was especially impressed because he had these Cambridge and Oxford credentials. So here was not just a really good talker, but it was someone with a polished academic resume to lend authority to what he said. So I began looking into one of the arguments he'd made and concluded that he'd been dishonest in the way he presented it to the audience. And it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like he lied or anything, but he didn't disclose a key that a key premise in his argument about the book of Daniel was really controversial. He made his audience think that there's no question that the book of Daniel was 6th century before Christ, when that's hugely controversial. And I just thought that was dishonest. I don't care or know or have any expertise in when Daniel was written, but if you're a Cambridge and Oxford academic, you know to not mislead your audience. And if your argument is based on that controversial a premise, you disclose it to the non-specialists, to a non-specialist audience. And Ravi didn't. No big deal, but it got me questioning him. And from there, I started looking into whether he really had a doctorate. Took a lot of poking around to realize he didn't have any earned doctorates. And then I looked into whether he had actually been a visiting scholar at Cambridge, like he widely claimed. It's all over his books and his speeches. He constantly refers to his time at Cambridge. Turns out he was never a visiting scholar at Cambridge. He had been on sabbatical at some church school in the town of Cambridge. And while he was there, he popped on over to the university and observed some lectures. And he converted that into visiting scholar at Cambridge. And in his official author bios, he would call himself Cambridge educated. Ravi did this after he'd already graduated from college and done his master's in divinity. And he was a 44-year-old preacher going and spending between 8 and 12 weeks at Cambridge, in the town of Cambridge, listening to some lectures. And he converted that to, I'm Cambridge educated. And so that was really an eye-opener for me. This guy wasn't just someone who pulled a fast one on some college kids around the dating of the book of Daniel. This was a very deceptive man about his credentials and about who he was. And then I noticed that he was calling himself a professor at Oxford. This was at his website for several years. This is something he stood before fans and donors at the C.S. Lewis Institute and said, I am now a professor at Oxford. Absolutely false. Not even close. The University of Oxford confirmed that he never has been on our payroll and he's never had a teaching position here. So, and from there it just went on, and pretty soon it inevitably sex stuff came up, and then more sex stuff. And now the whole world knows that he was a out of control sexual predator, in addition to just being a pathological liar. So that's how it happened for me. And I will say the first 5 years or so was extraordinarily frustrating for me, because I knew all this stuff about him, not the spa stuff, but I had sources tell me that he was sexually a very bad guy, and I wasn't allowed to talk about it. But for the first 5 years, no one really cared that about his credential fraud. Nobody really cared. They gave him the benefit of the doubt on the lawsuit he filed in 2017, which I assume we'll get to. But it's only been since that spa scandal broke in September of this year that the world is starting to take notice of Ravi Zacharias as a really, really nasty man. And that's really surprising. And I hope we get a chance to talk about that here.
Sure. And so the reaction was just resistance and ignore. They're trying to ignore you for the most part.
Yeah, there was a lot of ignoring me. I mean, I must have sent 1,000 emails out to Christian ministry and didn't get more than them to speak at their schools and give them honorary doctorates and give them ministry awards and this sort of stuff. And I really was upset about this enough that I decided I'm going to do whatever it takes to get the word out about this guy. I didn't particularly enjoy it. I felt like that annoying guy who everyone wishes would just go away. But I really did sense that there was something here that was very important. So I kept at it. And unfortunately, people didn't take the credential fraud seriously. Access to internal documents with eyes to see and or a willingness to see and access to the internet with a real keyboard could have confirmed what I was saying. But the Christian world didn't care. Ravi was too big to fail. He was important to the brand. He was important to God's kingdom. And the fact that he was lying about his credentials could not be discussed because that would have undermined the project. It would have been really bad for the evangelical business. And so people really sold their souls to keep Ravi looking clean. And that's really the big story here, I think.
Did that at all surprise you, or did you have a hunch, or did you anticipate that?
It surprised the heck out of me. I'll tell you, Paul, growing up with missionaries, I had nothing but, and my evangelical Southern Baptist experience here in California when I first moved to the US, I had nothing but high regard for evangelicals. And so I was pretty sure that once I confirmed with Ravi's ministry that he'd never been a visiting scholar at Cambridge, that they would fall on their knees and mea culpa and clean up their act. I really did expect that, and I'll never forget the surprise. I'll never forget the surprise I felt when they dug their heels in and misled the public about how Ravi Zacharias had misled the public about his Cambridge credentials. They lied to cover up his lies, and this kept going on, and I was just astonished. So yeah, it was a real surprise.
And you mentioned you were emailing different ministers or ministries. How else were you putting your findings out there, or your suspicions and blog articles, videos? How else were you putting it out there?
Yeah, I don't have a blog. I tend to be described in the press as an atheist blogger, and I wouldn't even know how to start a blog. You saw how much trouble I had getting on Zoom a little while ago. But I did it by sort of the Johnny Appleseed approach, sending out lots and lots of emails to, probably thousands of people. And I started a video channel called Friendly Banjo Atheist, where I put up some videos about Ravi. I published articles wherever I could on various people's blogs. And that was pretty much all I was able to do. And the Christian press didn't want to write about the story. They largely ignored what I was saying. And I published a book in 2018, hoping that would get some reviews and get the word out that way. And it was completely ignored by all but a couple of Christian bloggers. And the press didn't get any reviews. It provoked no discussion. And so it was frustrating. It took a good sex scandal to get Christians interested in integrity and to feel safe about being courageous about Ravi.
I guess to play devil's advocate a little bit, is it possible if some of those ministries saw you as just this is spam, he's spamming my inbox, or this is an atheist with agenda? How would you respond to either of those?
I'd say facts are facts. I could have had letterhead saying Steve Baughman, friendly banjo Satanist, out to get Ravi Zacharias. But here's an email from Oxford that says that he wasn't one of our professors. There you go. And I expected a little more from the Christian world. I expected them to be, I decided right at the beginning, I'm going to come out and I'm going to disclose that I'm an atheist. First of all, I don't think it's going to matter to Christians because they're going to be able to look at the facts. And secondly, I don't want people accusing me of covering this up later on. So I was right up front with it, and I was totally wrong. The overwhelming response was, and you can see it in my social media feed on Twitter and at my YouTube channel. I do hope eventually some Christian grad student or in sociology of religion or someone like that trolls through the comments at my feed and the comments in my YouTube videos, because it's astonishing how many people just dismissed me because I was an atheist. And that was really a big, Christians saw that. And by the way, when I say Christians, I mean almost all of the ones I encountered. There are exceptions, and there are noble exceptions. So I'm being a little broad brush here, but overwhelmingly, people used the fact that I was an atheist as an excuse to not face the facts about Guru Ravi Zacharias. And that was really another big surprise for me. I expected more from them.
Yeah, and just this whole ordeal, I've been thinking about, the words attributed to Jesus about be faithful in the small, and then you'll be faithful in the big. And I'm just thinking about Ravi, and if he's lying about these credentials, they're according to Jesus, there might be something more. But then again, what does it say about the evangelical community who?
What about that line? Is it Philippians where Paul says, as long as the gospel is preached, who cares about the motive, right?
Yeah.
Well, how about applying that to me? Who cares about my motive? I've got evidence that Ravi lied about Oxford and Cambridge and didn't have any doctorates. And here's his website where you see he's covering up the fact that his doctorates are honorary. Here it is. Nope. Atheist. Atheist was the excuse to keep their heads buried in the sand. And like I said, I don't think the fact that I was an atheist, or I could have been, like I said, a Satanist, that's no excuse to not listen to the message, especially when the message is presented with publicly available information that you can go out and check by yourself. So I just don't buy that.
Yeah, and you may not believe this, Steve, but I know that God used you.
I don't believe it, but thank you. So,
sure.
But I will say, Paul, I get that a lot, and all of a sudden have been God's tool throughout this whole thing. The message has changed, but all I did was something that most of us decent human beings will do. I saw an issue that no one was doing anything about, and that I thought I'm the only one who's going to do this if no one else does. So I did it. So I don't really think there's anything. I don't think we need God to explain why I did what I did, but because it really wasn't that noble. It was just I was irritated, and then I saw that this is not just a source of irritation. This is a real serious deception that's going on here, and I wanted to do something about it. So anyway, thank you for the compliment. Anyway,
sure. And one of the reasons I say that is because you exposed not only Ravi, but you exposed a lot of evangelicalism. You exposed affluent and comfortable or comfort-seeking evangelicalism. So in a way, this is bigger than Ravi.
Absolutely, this is absolute. Ravi is just another corrupt preacher who got caught with his pants down. Right? That's a man bites dog story. Sure. The really big story here is the village of evangelical leaders that it took to raise, nurture, enable, and then cover up for Ravi Zacharias. He didn't do this on his own. This was HarperCollins Christian Publishing people. This was Southern Baptist Convention. This was all the folks who were inviting him to their apologetics clubs to speak, after they knew that he'd paid money to silence a woman he'd had some online inappropriate encounters with at very least. They ignored the credential fraud, they ignored the federal lawsuit, and they kept treating him like he was God's gift to Christian apologetics, all the way till his memorial service, where you saw Mike Pence say, in Ravi Zacharias, God has given us the greatest apologist of our century. That was the way they viewed it until the damn spy information came out. And if that information had come out, Ravi Zacharias would be on his way to sainthood. They'd be building statues for him at apologetic seminaries around the country.
Sure.
It's really unforgivable the way the Christian community, the evangelical business world treated this. They put money, reputation, their bottom line ahead of the truth.
Yeah.
And I don't see any other way to look. If you think I'm being overly harsh, I just don't see any other way to look at this.
No.
And now there's a flurry. It's sort of like the thing. If you're a prominent evangelist, now you've got to put out a blog post about how horrible this Ravi Zacharias stuff was and what can we learn from this. I'm really glad that's happening, but the real lesson from Ravi Zacharias is why you guys didn't learn the lesson 20 years ago when he was lying about his credentials.
And I know that you had a dinner with Ravi. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I'd been in close contact with RZIM, Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, in 2015 when I was sending questions about his credentials. And the day that I found out about the Cambridge, that he'd misrepresented his Cambridge visiting scholar gig, I sent that to RZIM and asked for comment. And from that day on, they stopped communicating with me. It was just like they put in a blockade on communicating with a friendly banjo atheist. So, but then I kept sending them my questions and saying, look, I really want to talk to Ravi. I want to talk to you guys, have someone call me, answer these questions for me. And one day in November of 2017, I got an email from his PR person, Ruth Malhotra, saying, Ravi's in town. He'd like to have dinner with you tomorrow. So I met him at the restaurant and we had dinner. So I was very glad to meet him. Abdu Murray, I call him Ravi's henchman, was there. He's a lawyer and a very senior person in the ministry. So it was the three of us. And we got to talk for 50 minutes. We didn't get into a lot of stuff. It wasn't a real eventful dinner. We were just starting to get into stuff when all of a sudden Abdu's cell phone buzzed and he said, our Uber's here, we got to go. So, that was disappointing, but I was glad to have met him. And I talk about it in an article called My Dinner with Ravi. If people want to see that, they can just Google that and we'll get the details. The most interesting part was when I confronted him on his false statement about having chaired a department at a seminary that I know didn't have departments. And the look in his eyes was scary for me. I mean, I'm a pretty well-grounded lawyer. I've been in conflict situations before, but that look that Ravi gave me when I held his feet to the fire about that lie he told about chairing that department, he was angry and it was scary. And I finally got a glimpse into what it must be like to be a cult member for me to keep myself together when he looked at me like that. He really was a very powerful, charismatic guy who had a way of letting you know that he disapproved of the criticism. It was quite an eye-opening moment for me.
Sure. And you and I I don't think you're a psychologist. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm just curious what your own thoughts are on Ravi's personal faith. Do you think he had a personal faith?
Yeah, I don't know. I have a really hard gospel to get laid, to get money, to get prestige, but he believed so strongly that he was special, that he was important to the kingdom of God, and that there was a special set of rules for him. It's like, I think Jim Jones, the Kool-Aid guy at Jonestown, he went to his death for his cause. Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, went to his death for his cause. So I don't think people like that are simply making stuff up because it gets them power and glory and sex and all that. So I would go with some sort of narcissistic personality disorder where he really alive and felt that he was so special on it and God would be okay with it. That's what I think, but no one should care what I think about that.
You caught up just a bit, but I heard for the most part what you said, and you're saying that he likely had faith, but he was had a narcissistic personality. That's what you're getting at.
Oh yeah. That's funny that was a good time to cut out, because what I said is no one should really care what I think about this, because I just I don't know. But yeah, I think he believed his religion, but I think he thought he was an exception to it because he was an extra special guy. And if you read this book of his, this is his autobiography, Walking from East to West. I highly recommend that you grab a copy. Don't buy it new, because then someone will get money who shouldn't get money for it. But Walking from East to West, it is just loaded. It's like loaded with gems about how insecure Ravi Zacharias was as a young man. He had an abusive father who kept telling him what a loser he was. He longed to be adored by his friends and his family. And it's very clear that when Ravi converted to Christianity, I shouldn't say it's clear. It's clear to me that it had nothing to do with Jesus. It had to do with Ravi suddenly found the drug he needed to overcome his insecurities, the stage, right? If he'd been a better cricket player, he would have gotten his adulation as a cricket player, but he wasn't a very good cricket player. So they gather around him, and you have passages in that book where he's just shameless about the adoration he was getting and how good it felt. So I really think that he was a guy who needed a lot to remain happy, and the Christian world delivered big time.
Wow. This whole thing, I was talking to a friend recently, and he said that, I don't know if you know, I think it's in Proverbs, that love covers a multitude of sin. And my friend said he heard someone say that talent covers a multitude of sins. And that's exactly what happened here.
Talent covers a lot more sins, especially charismatic talent. Yeah, no, it's really true.
I want to thank you, Steve, for your time. I want to respect your time, but thank you so much for this, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me, and good luck to you and your project. And thanks for helping get the word out about Ravi. I think this is important stuff.
Of course. Blessings.